We are at our last presentation for the day. Certainly last, but very certainly not least. I would like to invite Mr. Kuljit, Ghata-Aura, who is the president of Boeing Middle East, Turkey and Africa, to give his presentation on commercial market update and the pathway to African aviation growth. So, karibu sana. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Well, look, let me begin by saying I'm really honored and thrilled to be with you today. It's particularly special for me to be here in Africa. So much of my family history is wrapped up in this continent. My grandparents left what was then British India back in the 1920s and 30s and made their homes in Kenya and Uganda. I myself was born in Uganda, so it's a really special occasion to be with you all today. So thank you for the Ugandan fans in the and Kenya. Kenya is also, I'm claiming as well, totally. So look, this is the last session of the day, so I will really try and hit the highlights. So much of what I'm going to say today we've covered already in different ways, but I still think it's important to look at this in the scope of a major aircraft OEM and just see how we contextualize it and how we look at a continent and a market like Africa. So, I think I've gone to the wrong presentation, right? Okay. Okay. That would have been embarrassing, doing the Airbus presentation. Okay. Yeah, so look, let's start at the beginning. We talked about the comeback. Look, the world has been ravaged economically by the pandemic. I think that it's safe to say, and I will caveat this in a second, that we are emerging from that. So if you look at it, Africa, compared to the world, actually was more resilient during the pandemic. And as it comes out, it's tracking slightly above the world averages in terms of the bounce back. Now, I will caveat that because you see, unfortunately, the world being the world, we have these sort of supervening events that come in and change things. Who foresaw that we would have this horrific situation in Ukraine, which obviously is having the pass-on effects of increasing fuel prices, but specifically for Africa, really exacerbating a food crisis, particularly in some of the jurisdictions. And so clearly, we can only look at the assumptions that we've got now, but it does feel that purely from the COVID-related effects, we are emerging. And so what does that mean for aviation in Africa? So again, if you look at the metrics in terms of active fleets and flights, you see Africa is pretty much tracking along with the world, slightly less so on capacity and passenger traffic. And I think our view there is that given the very sort of narrow body nature of this market, perhaps that's what's putting that down a few points. And if you really look at the industry as a whole, there's a lot of pent-up demand. I mean, that's clear. People are really wanting to travel. They want to travel for leisure. People want to travel for business. I mean, obviously, look at how many people we've got at this event. These in-person events give their own energy. I think we all come out of them feeling a lot better about the world and more connected. And again, I think that what we're going to find is that as the COVID protocols lessen and things are made easier to travel through the pandemic, I think that that's just going to get better. And clearly, corporate travel policies have got to catch up as well, because clearly that's something that will help drive the recovery there. So if you look at the African market, again, the GDP number, we look at that, and Africa's at 3%. That's tracking slightly above the world. The fleet growth is slightly above the world at 3.4 is against 3.1. But the one that really stands out is the traffic growth. This is at 5.4% for Africa compared to 2.7 for the rest of the world. And just to put that into context, that's tied third with China. So that gives you an idea of how important this market is as a growth market, and certainly we see it that way. And again, I'm not telling anybody anything we haven't heard about today, but we honestly think that the intra-Africa traffic will be the highest growth market in Africa over the last 20 years. Again, the reasons for that have been gone into by several different presenters throughout the day, so I won't belabor the fact, but we all understand that you know, the demographic is such that we're starting from a lower base in terms of people who have even traveled on an aeroplane, and so obviously there's the added advantage there, and also the fact that, you know, there's growing middle classes, and you know, with all the great initiatives that are coming through, we expect to see that as being the greatest driver. And again, numbers that you'll be familiar with, not too far out from the numbers that were just given by our colleague at Airbus or by Mitsubishi earlier on today. Over the next 20 years, we're looking at another just over 1,000 aircraft. We're looking at the split there really being between 72% single aisle and the remainder in the wide body. And I think that our view is that in both those ranges, we're really looking at the kind of mid-range single aisles and the mid-range to small-range wide body. And again, I think this is where I think with our own aircraft types, the MAX on the single aisle and the MAX family and the 87 family, they present a lot of versatility for an operator, because you can go from a smaller version to a larger version. I think that that's a really great differentiator for those aircraft in markets like Africa, where you need the versatility. So just again, looking at some of the issues that we've talked about earlier today, again, don't want to belabor this because we've been through a lot of this already, but clearly there are certain structural challenges that we need to address as an industry to enable this growth and to, in fact, try and exceed it. I'll really start with the financing side of it. You know, we are constantly going out to the finance community, lessors, trying to tell them the story of Africa and the growth story about Africa. I think there's a perception about Africa in terms of financing, and we're working very hard to try and redress that, because clearly the access to those funds is going to be very important to growth. Safety is obviously the number one priority. Always will be. Without safety, there is absolutely nothing. And again, we're working very closely with civil aviation authorities to ensure that there's a commonality of approach on safety at all phases of aviation. And you know, we're going to actually hold our first African Operators Conference in Tanzania in July, which again will be just a great event, bringing all the operators together and really pushing that safety message and the commonality of safety, which I think is just crucial. On competitiveness, look, we are fully behind any initiative like SATM, any initiative like a free trade area. I think these are just crucial to the growth of the industry. You wouldn't be surprised for me saying that, but you know, we focus a lot here around you know, entry and you know, trying to fly from one place to another and the costs that are entailed there. But I think, you know, we should also think carefully about the aftermarket, because it's all very well, you know, taking your shiny new aircraft, but you've got to support it. And so what will really make this market is where you can bring in indigenous MRO capacity, you can move parts seamlessly from neighbouring countries to another country, because honestly, that can be a real hold up on growth if you're having to constantly, you know, service parts out of Europe or out of the United States. So I think the competitiveness angle is absolutely crucial. A couple of other areas that I think are important are operational efficiency, and we've talked about the fact that costs are high and they look like they're going to stay high with the current fuel situation. So what I would say there is that, you know, we touched on it earlier today, but there's a whole range of digital products that are now available from many providers, obviously the best ones from Boeing, that really enhance these operations, that are pulling real-time data off the aircraft, enabling real efficiencies at every phase of the aerospace operations, whether that's from flight planning, crew rostering, clearly predictive maintenance type issues.